Hello, Lisa here. Welcome back to Tarot Memoirs. And this week we are going to be talking about the fives. So if you're wondering why my icon or my thumbnail image was a little like, that's why. Because fives. Fives are challenging, guys. So if you are new to this series, I will have a link up in the cards to the playlist for the full series. But Tarot Memoirs is a series working through the entire 78 cards of the tarot deck, where we are talking about what these cards mean. I use some of my favorite tarot books to talk about some excerpts that have really stood out for the meanings of the cards. I show a bunch of images from my collection of tarot decks, and then I share some memories and some personal experiences with the energy of these cards so that it can be more real and not just like archetypes on pictures on a card, but actually something that is relatable to experience. I've really found this practice to be super helpful for my own tarot journey, and I hope that it can help you guys as well. So with that said, we're going to dive into the fives. So I'm going to start with a little overview. So my tarot books I'm going to be working with for this, and have been working with for the entire deck actually, is this Kitchen Table Tarot by Melissa Sonova. For the minors, I'm also working with the Marseille Tarot Revealed by Yoav Bendov. So we will be looking at the minors in the Marseille Tarot as well. And I'm also working with the Druidcraft Tarot by Stephanie Cargom, and the illustrations in this deck are by Will Worthington. So we will be looking at all of these for the minors. So let's jump into Melissa Sonova's Kitchen Table Tarot. She has a note overall on the energy of the fives that I wanted to share. So she says, she calls the fives, the kind of keyword she has for the whole number grouping is renewed action. And so a couple things that stood out to me. After the inertia of the fours, we're gearing up again. The pentacles are recovery, the cups are regret, the swords are revenge, and the wands are revolt. The fives are about unrest and preparedness. These cards are hard. You don't get to pretty these up for clients. You have to just tell them what's going on. You can be optimistic with the fives and look to the next step, but you can't move on until you deal with the unrest and the disruption that's actually going on. So I thought that was really potent. Let's talk about the Five of Pentacles. So the Five of Pentacles, one thing that Melissa Sonova says is that this card represents being down on your luck, being ill, being disconnected from hope. It's a punch in the stomach. So this is a moment where we're experiencing some sort of loss or isolation. Inverted, things are looking up. Yay! Let's look at the Marseille. In the Marseille, we have this is from the Tarot de Maria Celia, which is a tinned version of a Marseille deck. It's just really beautiful. And in the Five of Coins, to get to the right page here, we have disruption. The single coin at the center pushes the others to the margins and defines a big space for itself. But the pointed leaves in light, well, this one says in light blue, but they're different colors. The pointed leaves above and below can signify a reaction from the existing structures that limits its movement. Disruption of stable patterns, success in something new, risk of finding oneself outdated and pushed to the side. So that's an interesting perspective on the four. And then let's look at the four also in the Druidcraft Tarot. Sorry, the five. I just said four. Where's my problem? I've done this in like the last couple videos. Just keep getting my numbers mixed up, but we're just looking at fives today. Just fives. Just fives. So in the Five of Pentacles in the Druidcraft Tarot, we have this figure who's looking a little bit upset. Did I read? You know what? Actually, before I do this, overall in the Druidcraft Tarot, there's a couple things I wanted to point out about the fives. Five is a number that symbolizes not only spirit and matter combined in the body and the universe, but also the freedom, power, and sometimes conflict or difficulty that arises through the changes initiated by the dynamic interaction between force and form, or spirit and matter. I thought that was a really cool phrase. So is this one. The meaning of the number five relates to the crisis that precedes and is often a necessary part of transformation. And for this reason, it is associated with the first stage of the initiatory process, the trial, challenge, or separation. And the message of the fives is initiation, change, freedom, rebirth, embodiment, and beyond the pain, the ecstasy. Which is really, really interesting. So we're dealing with conflict, yes, in the fives, but it's also important to remember that this is often a springboard for growth and opportunities to learn, right? So in the Five of Pentacles, our keywords are loss and disillusion, Fives signify change and often suffering or loss. Pentacles signify the material world. Finding this card in a reading may therefore indicate the possibility of material hardship or crisis, but caution is needed in making this interpretation, of course, because it might not be material at all, or it could be something that we're working up to be a bigger travesty than it really is, which is something else to remember. In the Four of Swords, in Melissa Sinova's book, sorry, 5, I keep saying 4, in the Five of Swords, you guys are going to just be like so annoyed with me. Let's move on to Swords. I've got my crap together. You know what, I'm going to have a sip of tea, because I need it. I do. Okay. Petty and self-involved thoughts keep you from noticing the people around you. You're thinking only of yourself, and this is distracting you from the greater good. Another note here is in the inverted. We see the Five of Swords inverted is asking why you are carrying all of this resentment around. It doesn't serve you. Put it down. So if you're the defeated one, then the inverse of this could be looking at why you're still wallowing in what has happened to you, basically. So I think this is a really interesting card because it looks to, yes, there's been a battle that you've either won and maybe not through the best of means, or you've lost and you're feeling really screwed over, but it's not the end. I think that's important to remember. Let's take a look at the Five of Swords in the Marseille. So in the Marseille, when we get into Swords, let me just get to the right page. The keyword for the 5 is breakthrough, and you can actually see the card literally breaking through there. A single upright sword with a white pommel. Okay, well this one doesn't have a white pommel. Bottom, thicker than in all the other odd cards, pushes its way out of a space confined by 4 curved swords. Now it does have a pommel that's different than the pommels of the other swords, as you can see. So it's an initiative to push forward and go beyond the present limitations. There's definitely some rebellion happening here, right? When we think about the fact that these 4 swords are all fairly uniform, and here's this like outlier just coming and disrupting all of that, like getting in there and causing trouble. That's what this is. And then let's take a look at the Druidcraft Tarot and look at the 5 of Swords in the Druidcraft. And we have keywords: defeat, blame, communication breakdown, and jealousy. There is a risk of defeat. You may be involved in a quarrel and feel as if you are losing the battle. It is possible that you've been subjected to humiliation, abuse, or malicious gossip. Another interpretation of the card is that either you are blaming someone or they are blaming you, or jealousy and envy may be surfacing. So I think that's pretty potent. Let's take a look at the 5 of Wands in the Marseille, or sorry, in the Rider-Waite-Smith. See, I told you guys, my words are all mixed up today. So in the 5 of Wands, it's difficult to see who's on the same team or if all of them are fighting each other. No one is going anywhere because all conversation is blocked. No one wants to talk. It's all stick waving. And what would Freud say about that? You guys, I freaking love this book. Actually, if you don't have this in your collection, get it. It's such a good one. I love the plain speaking. It's amazing. Inverted, the reverse of the 5 of Wands is not so much agreement or the opposite of the upright version. It's more like deciding that the fight is not worth your time. Like, do you really need to be duking it out with who you're duking it out with? Is that really necessary? It's a good question to ask. And finally, let's take a look at the Druidcraft Tarot and look at the 5 of Wands. And we have creative conflict, playful struggle, and competition. You may find yourself in conflict with others, although it might not be serious yet, which I thought was really poignant. And finally, let's take a look at our 5 of Cups in the Rider-Waite-Smith. So, Melissa Sinova calls this card the Maybe Life card. I talked with a friend who said that his high school sweetheart was pregnant with her first child and that it completely emotionally devastated him. He said that he felt stupid since it's been almost 20 years since he loved her, but that it hurt like he loved her and just lost her just yesterday. I got a little affronted at his dismissal of this love. It's real, it existed, and it probably still exists in some form. I don't know that it was the love that hurt him either. I think it was the death of the maybe life. 20 years ago, he saw her in his future, his children, his home, and his forever. He watched himself grow old and die with her by his side. Even though life stepped in and separated their paths, that maybe life was still breathing, just a little, until her path shifted just enough to make the maybe life completely impossible. There would be no heartfelt reunion, no shared children, no home, no future, not anymore, and not this time around. So moving along a little bit further into this description, she says, the Five of Cups in tarot is pretty much defined by maybe lives. The person is staring intently at the 3 cups that have spilled and is completely ignoring the 2 cups behind him. We tend to look back blissfully at the maybes and forget about the arguments in the relationship, the growth that we needed to experience, the choice that seemed so clear at the time. Going through that, losing that love, moving forward alone, all of that pain really forged us into who we are now. And who we are now is perfect. It's so much closer to the whole self that is waiting down the road. The 5 of Cups is about regret, sorrow, loss, and pain. Inverted, it's release and moving on. I thought that was really beautiful, and I think that it really speaks to this feeling of sort of wallowing and being lost in the grief and the sadness and not really seeing what's left behind, like where you have to go from here. And I think it can be really easy to get lost in that place of sadness and not progressing. Let's take a look at the Marseille. I skipped the Marseille 5 of Wands. We'll circle back to the Marseille 5 of Wands. Let's look at the Marseille 5 of Cups since that's what we're talking about now. Sorry. So in the 5 of Cups in the Marseille, we have links. The number 5 adds a new element at the center of a stable structure. The single cup at the center is surrounded by rich and flowing plant decorations with a suggested fruit at the top. Develop social skills, many connections, and links with other people. So in the Marseille, it's a fairly neutral card. It's speaking about growing connections and growing links. There may still be some disruption in the sense that you see, like these two feel like they may be connected. These two may be individuals or may be connected. And then there's this one that's sort of dominating the energy. So there could be a whole bunch of different ways to interpret this card, but it definitely seems more emotionally neutral than it did in the Rider-Waite-Smith. Let's look though, let's circle back a little bit to Wands briefly, just so I can talk about the 5 of Wands in the Marseille, because I skipped it by mistake, and see what that has to say. Overcoming. Oh, interesting. So this is what the 5 of Wands looks like. The number 5 introduces a new element that breaks the stalemate of the 4 and enables the dynamic wand suit to advance. So that's really interesting. Just above the crossing of these wands, the single one covers the edges of the perpendicular bands as if overcoming their opposition. Oh, interesting. Covers the edges. That may be... Oh, I see. Okay, so that's in this image. So in this image, you can see that this new wand is kind of covering up these edges of the yellow bands here, as if it's overcoming their opposition. In this version of the card, sorry, it's very disruptive. In this version of the card, you don't get that. But you definitely do get this image of sort of breaking up that stability, right? Breaking up that stalemate. So these two are like competing, and this one's like, nope, we're going to do it this way. Kind of makes sense. I like it. Let's look at the Druidcraft 5 of Cups, and then we'll look at some card images. So in the 5 of Cups, we have these keywords: sense of loss, unrecognized opportunity, and inheritance. Now, inheritance is an interesting keyword because I usually associate that with the 10 of Pentacles. But it says, when we experience loss, we tend to go through a series of feelings, from denial to anger to despair, until finally we have mourned enough and are able to look around us. It is at this point we discover that other opportunities, other experiences await us, symbolized here by the 2 cups that have not been overturned. So we have the 2 cups in the background here, and then we have these spilled cups here, and this person's just kind of like lost at thought, grieving, not seeing what's remaining. So let's look at some images from different decks. Uh-oh, I threw something. This is what I do on my channel. I throw things. I'm back. But I didn't throw the cards, so that's good. Here we go. So the first 4 are from Ciro Marchetti's Tarot of Dreams. We have our 5 of Coins. We see that loss and that hopelessness feeling, even though there's a bright shining light there that may offer some help. 5 of Swords. He looks pretty fierce. 5 of Wands. You definitely get that competition feeling for sure. It's very aggressive in this card, or in this deck. Our 5 of Cups. Then we have in the Everyday Enchantments, the 5 of Coins. Now this is interesting because we actually see somebody seeming to have a great time up front, but then there's people that are suffering in the back, right? Uh-oh, I dropped some cards. We'll see how that goes. Then we have a 5 of Blades, which is the 5 of Swords. Definitely a my way or the highway kind of approach here. The 5 of Wands. And the 5 of Cups. This one just breaks my heart. In the Little Monsters Tarot, we have our 5 of Coins, 5 of Arrows, which is the 5 of Swords, the 5 of Wands. I actually really love this image. They're not fighting with one another. They're just kind of like, what do we do now? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. It's definitely a stalemate. And it's definitely this idea that we're not making progress, because this kind of reminds me more of the whole, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, that you get sometimes in organizations where everybody's kind of like, I don't know, it's just bad communication, right? Cracks me up. And the 5 of Cups. And this person seems to be bathed in their sorrow. But what's interesting is that there's actually 3 cups remaining. So more remains than was lost. And they're still just drowning, literally, in their tears. In the Shadowscapes, we have the 5 of Pentacles here. The 5 of Swords. The 5 of Wands. And the 5 of Cups. In the Crystal Visions Tarot, 5 of Pentacles, 5 of Swords. Oh, she's been stabbed in the back here, which is just brutal. 5 of Wands, 5 of Cups. And then in the Tarot of the Hidden Realm, we have the 5 of Pentacles, 5 of Swords. Definitely some ferocity there. 5 of Wands. I love this tree climbing competition and play. And 5 of Cups. In the Heartful Tarot, the 5 of Coins, the 5 of Swords, the 5 of Wands, the 5 of Cups. The text on this one is really hard to see, but that is the 5 of Cups. In the Stretch Tarot, we have Worry for the 5 of Pentacles, Defeat in the 5 of Swords, Strife in the 5 of Wands, and Disappointment in the 5 of Cups. In the Happy Tarot, 5 of Pentacles, 5 of Swords, 5 of Wands. My dog is spazzing beside the bed right now. And 5 of Cups. Oh, he's so sad. Look, he dropped his ice cream. But there's so much more ice cream waiting. This one just cracks me up because it just reminds me of a classic childhood moment, right? And finally, in the Dark Mansion Tarot, we have our 5 of Pentacles, our 5 of Swords, 5 of Wands, and 5 of Cups. So as always, I'm going to be using the Dark Mansion Tarot to hold up while I talk about my experience with the 5s. So firstly, when it comes to the Pentacles, my keyword, my personal keyword that I use with this deck is loss. So for me, these are those moments when, on an everyday kind of small way, this energy shows up when I say no to myself and I'm a little bummed because maybe something's out of budget and I'm like, oh, I really need to wait. There's that moment where you're like, oh, that disappointment, right? So in a small, everyday kind of way, that's where the 5 of Pentacles energy shows up. Is for me is in material things or material experiences when something doesn't go the way I want, right? It's like the moment of, oh, really? And you're kind of bummed and you forget how much you already have. There's a little bit of entitlement sometimes in the 5 of Pentacles when we see it in an everyday capacity and we look at like what we want versus what we have. And a lot of times we can get hung up on what we want and can't have, and we forget how much we already have. When we look at the 5 of Pentacles, or when I look at the 5 of Pentacles in a bigger way, one of the most notable moments that I could think of was when Peggy and I, the boys were teenagers, and we had been living, I mentioned a terrible living situation in the fours. So if you haven't seen that, go check that out in the fours. But we were in a building that was just really toxic and we had to move. And so we found a new place, but just because of the nature of what rents were like at the time, the rent was nearly double what we had been paying. So it was quite an uncomfortable jump in rent. And we moved, and literally within maybe a couple of weeks of moving, Peggy lost her job. And it was nothing she could have controlled and nothing we could have foreseen. It just was what it was. But for a little bit there, we were kind of stressed because we didn't really know what we were going to do. The rent was high. We couldn't really afford to move all over again because just moving is expensive, right? We worked it out. We made a plan. We made a budget. We figured it out, right? We were okay. It wasn't as much a travesty as it felt when it first hit us. And we were sorted within months. It wasn't that big of a deal. And we still managed to pay all our bills and pay our rent, and it was fine. But it was stressful, right? And this is when I really feel like I experienced that. The closest experience I had to that was probably then. There have definitely been times when I felt more isolated in that experience, or times when I felt, or where maybe that experience was more emotional than tangible and material. But I really feel like the Pentacles are often talking about those tangible experiences. And I'm sorry if I'm distracted, but I just noticed that there is a spider right outside my window in my bedroom. And he's just hanging out. He's fine. I just wanted to make sure he was on the outside, and he definitely is. So we're good. He can hang out there and eat his flies and have a good life. It's okay. But I had a moment. Moving on. Let's talk about the Five of Swords. So this is a tricky card because I think a lot of times this card speaks to when we're maybe not behaving in the most direct or honest way, or when we're maybe not behaving at our best, or when we feel really screwed over, or you know what I mean? Like this is difficult energy. For me, in an everyday way, it's when I just do bad stuff. No, but for reals. The example that I wrote down in my notes here is sometimes I'll insist that I want something for dinner, for example. Let's say I'm feeling really picky and I'll insist that I want something. And so I fight for it and I get it and that's fine. But then I might find out later that, like, okay, I'll give you a tangible example. I love spaghetti. I love it. I really love it. It's my comfort food. But spaghetti leveled up is lasagna. But lasagna is more work. It's more expensive. There's more ingredients. So there's like lasagna up here and then spaghetti down here. But I could come home from work and be like, people, like, I really want me some spaghetti for dinner. Can we have spaghetti for dinner? Can we have spaghetti for dinner? And I'll push and push and push and I'll get spaghetti for dinner. But there might be some ricotta in the fridge and some sausage, and it might have been a plan to have lasagna. And I screwed it up because I fought for the spaghetti. I know that seems kind of dumb, but there's like a lot of those little kind of bickery things that I feel like I can do on a day-to-day basis where I'm fighting for something without realizing that I maybe don't even want the thing I'm fighting for, or B, I'm being unnecessarily demanding. There's things like that I feel like where this sort of energy shows up where I'm the bad guy, right? And of course, there's tons of times in our lives when we feel like we're the one being screwed over, right? We feel like somebody's taken advantage of us, or we feel like somebody has betrayed us, or has used unfair means to get ahead. And all of that kind of stuff is like everyday sort of swordsy energy, Five of Swordsy energy. In a bigger way, notable five, let's see. Oh yes. So this one time I had a very, very, very close friend. And that entire friendship fell apart, like just blew up in like phenomenal fashion because of an argument we had because I'd spent time with a different friend that she didn't approve of, she didn't like. It had nothing to do with her. This was a friend I'd had for years before I ever knew her. But she was really upset. She was offended. As far as she was concerned, it was a big secret thing, even though I told her that I met with this friend. It was just this horrible argument. She won the argument. I was like, okay, I'm sorry. Like, I get it, but like, I also am not going to I apologize for how she felt, but I wouldn't apologize for having met with this friend because this was a friend and she wasn't the boss of me. And it initiated this huge blow up where our entire friendship fell apart. And so in that circumstance, she was kind of this dude who, yeah, you won the battle, but you lost a friend in the process. And like, was it worth it? You know what I mean? Like, was it worth all of that just to win this one argument or to prove a point? Like, what was that about? So I've had a lot of experiences like that in my life, but that's one of the more memorable ones where I was these dudes in the back like, okay, I guess I lose a friend. Sucks. But I've had experiences like that, right? So Five of Swords, not fun energy. Five of Wands is a little bit different in that a lot of times this is good-natured. It's not always, but a lot of times this is good-natured kind of stuff, right? Or it's stuff that, like, we're not really communicating well, but it's fine. So the everyday thing that I thought about with this was the way that Peggy and I can kind of, like, subtly compete back and forth for, like, who's off the hook for feeding the dogs tonight? Like, is it you? Is it me? Am I going to be too busy? So we kind of, it's not competing. It's more like mutual whining. And one of us feeds the dogs and it's fine, and then the next time somebody else does it, and, you know, whatever. We work it out. But that's what that kind of made me think of. When we're talking about sort of a notable time in competition, I actually really struggled because, as it turns out, I don't like to compete at all. And in fact, one of my worst habits when it comes to my self-worth journey is that when faced with competition, I have a tendency to just pull away. If I sense that somebody is wanting to be the bigger, better, smarter, whatever, it's like, okay, you go have that and I'll go over here. Because I'm not interested in that kind of stuff. Competition really annoys me. And it annoys me when I feel like that's more important than the thing that's being competed for. Does that make any sense? Sometimes there's just people you encounter in your life who get really hung up on winning. And it's like, I'm not interested in winning. I'm interested in whatever the thing is that you're trying to win at, right? But I'm not interested in the actual winning or losing. So for me, competition is a tricky place. And so I don't actually have a lot of memories I can think of where I was actively engaged in competition because I kind of just step off, right? Not doing it. And maybe that's my own stubbornness. But, yeah, not doing it. I resist. I refuse. No. But I will argue about who's going to feed the dogs. Yeah, I will compete on that point. Definitely. And the last one is the Five of Cups. So in a small way, the Five of Cups is those times when I make mistakes, or I hurt somebody's feelings, or my feelings are hurt, and I'm just wallowing in that feeling and not letting it move on, right? Sometimes I'm wallowing and I'm beating myself up. Sometimes I'm wallowing and I'm just feeling really picked on. And when I'm in that space of wallowing, I find that it's a very self-focused place to be. And some of my shadow work has actually been around looking at this as what it is, which for me, and we're not talking like this is small energy, we're not talking grieving and loss and hurt. I'm talking like the little things. For me, when I find myself wallowing in that stuff, it's a very kind of selfishy place to hang out that isn't very productive. So I try to work on not doing this, whether it's beating myself up, whether it's wallowing in a small hurt that I've experienced. I try to just process, feel, and then move forward. Whew, the fives were intense. We should have a little bit of an easier time in the sixes, sevens, eights, and most of the nines. And then we'll hit some rocky places again in the tens. This might be false promises. But I really enjoyed that. It was, it's fun to go through them and to attribute it to my life, even when it's difficult stuff I'm talking about. But I really encourage you to engage with this whatever way you're comfortable with. Either leave a comment down below if you want to share some experiences you've had with the fives, or join us in the Supportive Tarot Facebook group, or you can, if you are the journaling sort, do our journal prompt, which for the Minor Arcana is simply to just write down a memory or an experience that you associate with that particular Minor Arcana card. So this week it would be the fives. And think of a Five of Wands moment, a Five of Cups moment, a Five of Swords, a Five of Pentacles, and make a note of it. And you will find that the cards just become so much more real for you and so much more meaningful when you can associate them to areas and experiences in your own personal life. So thank you so much for hanging out with me. I'll see you all again very soon. Until next time, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You know the drill and all the good stuff. Bye.